Today on Independent Wrestling Profiles, we're talking with the Little Murder Machine, Travis Moore. When did you first get exposed to wrestling as an industry in any form?
My family watched wrestling from the beginning. My granddad took my uncle to a what was that? What was the stadium called? It was in Hamilton.
Cops Coliseum?
Yeah, Cops Coliseum.
Okay.
And it would be like it was like Andre there and stuff.
Whoa, wow. Okay, that's going back.
Yeah, Big John Studd and yeah, they watched that. And when I was born, they were watching wrestling still, but then they started like slowly getting out of it as like time went on. It was becoming the Ruthless Aggression era, and then I just kept watching it.
Okay.
And I was like the one that was like obsessed with it. I had all the action figures, and I have a bunch of magazines over there. I keep watching wrestling whenever I can.
Does that mean you started with like the Attitude Era as a child?
I was born in 2001, right? So I just missed.
Okay, all right. Because I was going to say, that's definitely not the era to introduce a child to. I don't know
No.
if you've gone back and experienced it as an adult later on, but like it was definitely pushing envelopes that they don't do now.
Oh yeah, it's very degrading to women.
Yes, yes, and also a lot more blood, violence. Like they
Yeah.
were really trying to do whatever they could. So you're a kid, you're watching, and your family is kind of starting to fall out of it. How do you stay watching it throughout the Ruthless Aggression era when it becomes kind of like your own thing? Like you've taken it upon yourself rather than it be for everybody.
I think they were just kind of like my dad would watch it sometimes with me, and like my mom knew what was kind of going on because I would just ramble to her right afterwards. My brother would call it fake and like very mean words.
Oh,
I would keep watching it, and there's like guys like Edge that would keep me into it, and Ray. Edge and Ray were like two big ones for me, and I was a big Cena fan, like a huge Cena fan, as every kid was then.
was there something about those particular performers that appealed to you? Was it maybe their style, their look, maybe matches that they had? Like what was it about those guys that put them at the top for you?
Cena, I think it was just that like you're young and like he's the biggest baby face. He's the biggest, he's the cookie cutter. Even though he really wasn't, if you think about it, he was kind of obscene at times. His rap gimmick.
Well, I think that's just it. Everybody who thinks Cena now thinks like the later years, and they don't actually go back to when he was a heel and he was cutting promos because they talk about like, oh, I wish he had a heel run. It's like he had a heel run. It's just
Hmm.
before you guys were paying attention.
It was very good. And then Edge, I love his character. He's my favorite wrestler of all time. My favorite character.
Did you have a favorite Edge match or feud at all?
His feud with Cena, that's the big one. And like his match with Cena at SummerSlam, I would think it was in Toronto too.
I'm not sure about like locations for events too often, but like, are you a little torn with something like that? Because you got the two guys you cheer for facing each other. It's like, how do you pick a side?
The thing was like I liked Edge, right? But as a kid, I was kind of like, oh yeah, Cena, right? And then as I got older, I rewatched the match. I'm like, wow, this is so good. Now that I'm like understanding the idea behind it and everything, it's so much better to like rewatch and like fanboy out to it.
Did you have a chance at this time to do any of this live, or was this all just on TV? Like, did you get to experience the feel and the crowd of a live show at like as you're growing up and being a fan and stuff?
Oh, like going to a show?
Yeah. How long was it until you got to actually go see a show?
I was 17 when I
Oh,
first. I bumped before I went to a live show.
oh, wow.
Yeah, so I did a Josh Alexander seminar when I was in high school, and like my buddy was like, "Oh yeah, Josh Alexander, he's a great wrestler. Go give it a shot." Right? So I did a 2-day seminar with him. The first day I learned how to bump and lock up, and the second day I learned how to do like a schoolboy, right? And Josh was like, "Hey, you should keep doing this. Like, give it a go." Right? So I kept doing it, and I went to my trainer who was Rip Impact, and I haven't really looked back since. unless we're talking injuries, then yeah, I've had a couple.
Hold on. So you never went to a live event. You
No.
didn't do any training yet. Your friend just says, "Hey, let's go to this seminar that's being run by Josh Alexander."
Yep.
And your first experience of wrestling in the ring, getting in, doing anything on your own, is him telling you that you should keep doing this?
My buddy didn't come with me. It was just like he's like, I know you're like the one that wants to be a wrestler out of all of us. So he's like, you should go. So I went, and then it was at Battle Arts, and it was like guys like Albright and Forza and like Jody, they're all doing the seminar. I did the seminar, and like that's my first experience meeting those people. And he was like, yeah, you should give this a shot. Like you did good today.
That's amazing for a first experience. So, did you start after that? Did you take that as like a launching platform to get into training and actually start doing it?
So I waited like a month because I had to get a job, right? My mom paid for it, that first one, because she was like, hey, like, I'll pay for this because I know you want to do it. But if you're going to train, you have to get the responsibility and like start paying for your training. And so I started a job at my first time like paying for it, I paid off 2 months because I did like some snow shoveling with my godfather who ran his own landscaping business. And ended up paying it off. And then I got a part-time job at a grocery store. And that's how I paid off my wrestling school. And I kind of forgot what the question was for a second.
It was if you got into wrestling after that weekend, because like that's a crazy first experience. And then, well, you figure you want to keep going from there, right? Keep the momentum.
Yeah, and like I had like a month where I had to wait because of that, the job experience and everything. But after that, I kind of like just kept training.
When you said you had to wait a month, were you just working that time and just kind of waiting until you could actually start training and getting in the ring and bumping and stuff like that?
The way it went was I didn't know any other wrestling schools than Battle Arts.
Okay.
And my mom was just very straightforward with me. She was like, hey, I'm not driving to Battle Arts from Burlington every day. And I said, okay, that's very understandable. I'm going to look for anything closer. And then I found my wrestling school that was in Hamilton. That's very close by. And she's like, you know what? We can go there. That's when I emailed Rip, and I still have the emails now. And it's like, I told him my experience, and he was like, okay, we're going to put you in a class. We'll see what you can do. It took like a month or something. I remember my first day of training.
You remember your first day of training, how it felt,
Like,
what you were thinking, like what was
yeah,
going through your mind?
yeah. I remember how scared I was and like how nervous I was as well. Because I was like a young kid.
Yeah, so you started early.
Yeah, I started pretty early. I started near the end of no, it was like the beginning of grade 12.
Okay, so you're actually going to school at this time as well?
Yeah, and it was kind of complicated because like school was getting more difficult because of that. The combination of like wrestling and then having to do homework and stuff. And I wasn't a kid that did homework really, but like I realized like if I failed, like I would have to do another year of high school, right? And I didn't want to do that.
Still can't be easy. I mean, you're doing high school, you're doing homework, you're doing a part-time job. I'm assuming you're doing, just socializing with friends and hanging out and whatever, and then training on top of that. Like that's got to be a lot of responsibility for somebody at your age to try and balance that all out, to coordinate it all, and still be able to like come out of it in the end, right?
Yeah, well, like it got complicated because I broke my collarbone.
Oh, yeah.
It was like one of my first days of training. When I broke my collarbone, I had to have my arm in a sling. So like teachers would be like, "Hey, are you able to write?" And I'd be like, "I can't even move my arm, man." Yeah, that made my job even more complicated because I had a job and I had a broken collarbone and I had to push carts.
Oh, geez.
And I remember I did a job interview at the gym and I had to bike there and I had my arm in the sling and I was biking to the job interview. And then they were like, "Hey, can you work out with us during the interview?" And I said, I can't do that. My arm is not able to carry any weight." And then like 2 or 3 weeks later, I went back to training and I broke it again.
Jeez. How did you break it the first time? Was it just like a bad bump or
It was a
like
shoulder roll. It was really funny. Like I didn't know how to properly shoulder roll, so I went for it, and there was like a weird feeling, and I was like, okay, that felt really weird. And I asked my trainer again. I was like, hey, can I do that again, just to like see how that feels? And I did it again, and I was like, okay, I need to roll out. And I got out of the ring, and Rip was like, hey, go check on yourself, like see how everything is. And I went to the hospital like the Monday night or something, and they're like, yeah, you're fractured your collarbone. And I was like, okay. And I waited 3 weeks, did a tiger roll, so like a diving roll, and then I heard a pop. And right after that pop, I was like, oh yeah, and I went right into shock. My collarbone like was even more fractured than it was before.
oh
And I
wow.
waited like maybe a month or so, like a month or a month and a half to go back.
And you weren't like kind of put off by this? I mean, that seems like it would be a lot to bear at the beginning and still kind of carry forward, like I would imagine some people would be like, well, this isn't for me if this is going to happen. Like,
So like the way I looked at it was when I first did it, I was like, okay, this is just like stuff happens, right?
mhm.
The second time I sobbed, like I cried, I cried, like when it happened. And it wasn't even like physical pain, it was just emotional pain of just being like, I can't do this. And then like ended up, I think it was at the doctor, I was kind of like in that same state of mind where I was like really sad. And then when I started training again, I was like, okay, I can keep doing this. And then I took it slow with those rolls afterwards. And like it took me a while to even do that roll.
Did you have like trouble with injuries again after that, or was it just kind of like at the beginning and then you got past that, learned how to deal with it and kind of move forward?
I've been rocked a few times. That's about it. I've had my shoulder kind of like really aggravated after like one of my first matches. My shoulder like popped up when I was doing a move and I bumped funny and like it hurt for weeks. But like I don't think it was like actually injured. It was just probably like what would it be like a sprain or something.
Okay. Pretty lucky with injuries after that, just like a terrible introduction to it.
Exactly. It was a very awkward introduction into wrestling.
Okay. Now you referenced kind of that shoulder injury happening during one of your first matches. Do you remember what your first actual match was? Like once you were training, how long you were training, how it came up?
Yeah, so like I started September 2018. I had my first match June 2019.
Okay.
So if we're counting the time I took off with the collarbone, it would be like December 2018 to June 2019. And I did a battle royal for HWE, like Hamilton Wrestling Entertainment, and it was the pre-show battle royal. And I was like scared. And there was like guys like Ethan Page in the locker room, like Tyson Dukes, all those guys. And I was scared. I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on this. So
If you do, I'm going to edit it out. So,
okay, I was very nervous. Looking around, I was just so like, oh my God, that's Ethan Page. And then guys I looked up to, like Hacker, were on the card and everything.
Scotty O'Shea?
Yeah,
Okay.
Scotty O'Shea, the man.
That's some pretty big names. Like from going to your first training with Josh Alexander to being in a locker room with Ethan Page, Scotty O'Shea. Was there any of these people that really like just kind of motivated and inspired you on an independent level now that you've seen not just like the WWE where you're seeing John Cena and you're seeing Edge and you're seeing kind of like the glorified version, but seeing guys almost in the trenches that are doing what you're doing that kind of almost led, even if it was just by example, that really like encouraged you to keep going?
So when it first started, it was Josh, like because Josh wasn't signed by that point, right? That was the guy that like inspired me to keep going, right? Because I was like, I just want a match against this guy, right? And I still am looking for that match, but he's not going to be doing independent dates anymore. So hopefully, maybe something happens in the future. But then it was also guys like my trainer and Hacker was a big one for me as well. He was someone I looked up to very much. I thought he was the best on like the smaller scale. He was such an innovative wrestler, right? And like he was such a good heel as well.
Yeah, I know my very first independent show was a Smash show, and Kill Screen was on the card. And like it always stood out to me. It was just, it had a look, it had a feel, it was fantastic.
He's so good, and the kill screen idea was so cool as well.
So now that you're actually getting more training under your belt, you've gotten your first battle royale under your wing, like where do you get to where you're like getting regular bookings and you're starting to get actually regular matches rather than just battle royales? Did you find that there was a point where you kind of like hit your stride, so to speak?
I started getting more matches around 2019 August,
Okay.
I'd say. So it took like 2 months before I had like an actual match. And my first match outside of battle royals and rumbles was me, Matt Cash, and Jesse Mack versus Steve Brown, Hacker, and Del Bruno. And it was such an awkward time because I forgot my gear
Oh.
because I didn't know I was going to be wrestling and I had to be filling in for someone. So I had to wear Jesse Mack's yoga pants because I was wearing jeans and I didn't want to wear jeans in the ring. So I wore camo yoga pants.
Do you remember how like you felt going out there for that match? Like were you still really nervous, or is that kind of the type of thing where you're only really nervous beforehand and then once you break the curtain, you just kind of get into another gear and it kind of melts away?
I was scared the whole time.
Old.
I'm a very nervous person. That's the funny thing, right? And at that point, I was just like, I don't know what I'm doing. And my moveset was very limited, right? So I didn't know what I was going to be doing. I just kind of listened to what they were telling me to do, and I did it all. And I was very happy about how the match went. And like looking back on it now, I'm like, oh my God, I was so bad. But now I'm like, you know what? Like, I'm proud of myself, for going for it.
Well, I mean, I've been lucky enough to see you compete a number of times at this point, and I think that like your in-ring work is fantastic.
Thank you.
What I also really like is your character work. I love the persona. I love like the almost like the dark, brooding kind of loner almost, I guess you would say. Is that the kind of idea that you had for a character right from the start, or was that something that evolved over time? Like, did you know what sort of presentation you wanted to put forward of yourself when you started?
Yeah, I had an idea of what I wanted to do, but I didn't do it right away. I was Safe Travis, and then I was the Day Tripper, and then I became the way I am now. And like that evolved over time. Like I didn't have the Lil Murder Machine gimmick until later on. When I first started, I was a very happy cookie cutter baby face, and then I became like a kind of psychedelic gimmick because I liked that sort of stuff when I was in high school. And then I became more brooding because I think it reflects my personality more.
That's a very unique moniker, the little murder machine. So I have to ask you, like, where did that come from?
So I had a feud with Von Vertigo at PWO, and we were doing like a best of three series. And the whole idea was Kingdom Anthony James was going to become my manager. And at the end of the match, I turned heel and I attacked Von Vertigo. And Kingdom became my manager. And during his promo after the match, where he's like, being like, oh, Travis Moore, he's my new client. The little murder machine is here. And he said that, and I like looked at him. And I was like, that is so cool of a nickname. I think it's funny because I'm like, oh, it's so cheesy, but I'm also like, that's so cool.
I think it's so cool. And the fact that it came from Kingdom James, who is absolutely phenomenal in our industry, just makes it that much better, right? Like, so he is kind of like your regular manager at this point?
For PWO, yeah, I'm trying to get Gia to become my manager elsewhere
Okay.
to get her those reps to see what managing is like as well because she's done a few manager gigs, but we're gonna try and get her to do that before she starts wrestling. And when she starts wrestling, she's gonna be killing it. I know she can. But like Kingdom is right now my manager for PWO, and he is such a smart guy. I'll message him sometimes and be like, "Hey, what do you think of this?" And he'll tell me like straight up if it was a good idea or if he just thinks it's stupid.
Well, there's something to be said about the honesty, but I mean, having a voice like Kingdom James to be able to soundboard things off of feels like such an advantage when you're just kind of still kind of working and learning and improving and evolving your character. I feel like that's probably going to benefit you in the end, right?
No, it is very much beneficial because he's said stuff to me that like sticks out to me. He made this like Lego analogy that makes sense to me because I'm also a Lego guy. He said you're past the point where you need to look at the manual and build the blocks they told you. You're past the point of he said you're on the point where you don't need the manual and you'll still build those foundation blocks. He's like, we're going to get you to that point where you don't need a manual and you'll just get free reign to make whatever you want. And you'll have like your own choices to make.
Oh man, that's amazing because he's essentially telling you like you got all the pieces now, and you just need to put them together.
Exactly.
There is one other tandem I want to ask you about because we're doing the back-to-back interviews, and it's your team as the Commotion. How did that come to be?
So me and Grizzly Mack are really good friends. We have been since we met. We knew each other from because I went to Josh's school a couple times as well because Josh had a school. We like when we first met, we were kind of like not like the closest, but we could joke around with each other. And then we started seeing each other more because of like Alpha One and going to Barry because he's close to there, and we would start becoming closer and closer friends. So we'd message each other, and then now we're like best friends, and we both like tag team wrestling as well. And we're like, hey Ben, how about like you put me and Grizz together? And Ben was like, oh yeah, like we'll see what we can do about it. And Ben made us do a tag team match one week, and he was like, I like it. I like what you guys are doing, and we continued doing that, and now we like evolve the image of like the Commotion to like what we are more sticking out for. He's the hockey player, the rough goon kind of feel, and I'm what I am now, right? Kind of like the scrappy little underdog part of the team. We originally had it as just like two best friends, and then we made it into like hockey based gimmick.
I mean, but you are friends at the end of the day, and I have to imagine that even on the occasions that you get to team together, it probably must feel pretty nice to go out there with somebody that you know, that you trust, that you have chemistry with. Has that helped you move along in some days when maybe motivation is a little bit harder to find?
Oh yeah, like I have like I'll be like going to a booking and like I won't know like Grizz is gonna be there, or like I know he's there but I think he's gonna have a singles or something. So I'm just kind of like it'll be days where I'm like I don't really want to wrestle right now. And I get that like sometimes. And then he'll be like, "Oh, we're doing a tag team match." I'm like, "Okay. I know we can do this now." Like I know like we're gonna be laughing about stuff the whole time. Having matches with Grizz is like the best time because we like also like tell each other when like Kingdom, like we'll tell each other when we think something's stupid or when we think something is a great idea. And like I was texting him about move ideas today for like alternate tag finishes, and he was like, "Okay, we're gonna need to practice that one."
So I do want to ask you, like, what is probably your biggest highlight match that you've had in your career thus far? I know probably everybody's got one, and there's probably going to be many more to come, but is there one that stands out to you so far where you look back at it and you're like, man, I'm so glad that I was able to do that. You know, like the fact that I became a wrestler and that I was able to do that just makes this feel almost like worth it. I guess if that sounds a little too cheesy.
No, you're not being cheesy at all. Tyler Bateman from Ring of Honor and New Japan. I had a match with him at a defunct promotion. I'm not going to say the name because the owner was kind of a jerk,
Okay.
but the guy was booking me, and he's like, "Oh, I'm going to put you against Bateman." And I knew Bateman from when I was in high school, right? Like his stuff because I watched Ring of Honor and I watched PWG, and I messaged him right away and I was like, "I'm so excited to work you." And we had the match, and it was such a fun match. Like it was it inspired like how I am now in my wrestling style and everything. Like the way Bateman acts and the way Bateman works as well, like his striking and his way he carries himself is very inspiring for me.
That's amazing. So that being said, is there somebody that is on like the bucket list, like a dream opponent or somebody, and maybe dream is a little too strong, but like, is there somebody that you're still, other than Josh Alexander, because you already referenced
Yeah.
that, is there somebody else that you know is just on the list that you're like, man, I would love to be able to get in there. It just hasn't happened yet, but I'm hoping one day we can make it work.
Judas Icarus. Gia makes fun of me all the time because of how big of a fan I am of Judas Icarus.
I can't blame you for that. He's
Yeah.
phenomenal.
And I think he's one of the best Canadian talents to come out of Canada. Like he's like so he has this way he carries himself, and I think that would like mesh well with how I carry myself in the ring. and like the way we wrestle would be very interesting to see how it goes.
I actually think that would be a phenomenal match. I mean, I've described your style in the past as beautiful chaos, and when I think about it a little bit more, that kind of fits Judas as well.
Yes, he is very chaotic as well, the way he wrestles.
Is there anything that you feel like you still need to really work on to improve as a wrestler?
So much. Like there's so much I need to improve on. Like you every day is a learning experience. So I think I need to work on my promos, and I think I need to work on like even character work. I think I need to still work on like what exactly is Travis Moore, right? Because I'm not gonna be afraid to say my real name. Brendan Adair is like one guy. Travis Moore is a completely different person. I need to still figure out what exactly Travis Moore is and what his motivations are in life.
I think the perfect point is when the two meet in the middle, right? Like when you can take
Yes.
an element of yourself and an element of who you want to be and you can put it together. Let's step foot out of the ring for a minute. You know, you obviously are very dedicated to wrestling. You commit yourself to it, you spend a lot of time in it, but eventually you got to take a break. What do you
Yep.
like to do to pass the time?
I love playing video games and I love watching movies.
Oh, okay. What kind of movies do you like?
It depends. Like me and Gia, like we'll just figure out like, okay, this is like a childhood movie that I liked, and like we watched like Scooby Doo, like the like live action ones with like Matthew Lillard, and then we also watched like Miss Congeniality because she loves that movie, and Mean Girls. That was my first time watching Mean Girls, and like we she would show me movies and I would show her movies, and we would also watch like Superstore. Like she introduced me to Superstore, and I love that show.
Love Superstore.
She is has such good taste with her TV and her movies.
When it comes to movies, do you have like a genre that's your favorite? Like a type of movie?
I'm a big I'm a big superhero guy. Like we watched Deadpool and Wolverine the other day, and that movie is so good.
So good.
She even said she's like, "Oh, that's in my top 10 probably now."
I think that's my top Marvel movie now. I'd
Yeah,
have to sit with it a little bit more, but I'm thinking it's my top Marvel movie.
yeah, it's very good.
So what about video games? What kind of video games do you like?
I love Skyrim. I'm a big Fallout guy as well. I like kind of like those role playing games that like kind of like make you escape into a like new character kind of thing. And like I love the medieval stuff, right? I'm a big like I love the Game of Thrones, and like I played Elder Scrolls my like since I was a kid. So I played Oblivion, and I haven't really given online a chance because I'm like worried that it's gonna ruin my taste.
Do you mean like Elder Scrolls Online?
Yeah, because I'm not a big MMO guy, right? So I get kind of worried about that stuff.
Uh, well, if you ever need advice, I got like 800 hours clocked in it.
Okay, well I will definitely text you if I ever start it.
So I just want to ask you before we like get to signing off, if you could go back and give yourself a little bit of advice or give another young aspiring wrestler a piece of advice, what would you tell them?
I watched the interview with John Cena from Chris Van Fleet, and he's like, control the controllable. So don't get caught up in stuff you can't control, and just figure out stuff that you can control. So if that's your character and your body and everything like that, that stuff you can control. Work on that, but you can't like control how something is going to go. Like I've had experiences where I was upset because something did not go my way when I couldn't control it. That's fine because at the end of the day, life goes on, right? Another big thing is you are above no one and no one is above you. So we're all equals at the end of the day, and this is a collaboration over competition.
I love that. It's like all of the advice is to just kind of keep a level head, right?
Yes.
And that's fantastic. Travis, I really want to say thank you so much for sitting down with me and doing this. I really appreciate it. Before we sign off, can you just let people know where they can find you online if they want to follow you, if they want to keep up to date with what you're up to?
Yeah, so Instagram, Travis Moore LMM, Twitter at the Travis Moore. I mean X, sorry.
And no, I still call it Twitter. I refuse to call it X.
I don't have Blue Sky yet, but I'll probably get that.
Thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it, man.
Thank you for tuning in to Independent Wrestling Profiles. Please help out the show if you can with a like, subscription, or review. We'll see you next time.